Welcome to Rational Discourse Weekly, where we discuss why we do not believe in a God, and we cover topics like...
This week we got militant atheism in the charged political environment we've got going on right now, as well as the important role of skepticism in free thought and rational discourse.
We also have another segment called, tentatively, Ongoing Segment on Social Media, where I discuss some of the topics that come up on Twitter and other networks like Google+. We also have a new segment called Atheist Ally or Godless Evildoer. And this week we talk about Penn Jillette and his book, God No.
I mean, at this point, everything seems to be dominated by the election. I mean, everything I'm hearing is tied into this one way or another. It's kind of a crowded space for smaller, more philosophically or, cliquey issues to come to the fore. I mean, it plays into it. I read that article that Christopher Hitchens wrote about Mitt Romney in 2008 or 2007 when he was running the first time, at least in the primaries, and basically was demanding, it's totally reasonable to push someone on their religious beliefs, especially what would be considered a fringe belief, because those beliefs have consequences for how this person acts if they're in any way genuine.
Right.
Or have any integrity with those beliefs.
I knew he probably talked about the racism that existed throughout the Mormon Church.
Well, yeah, and the fact that he was an adult member of the Mormon Church when it was officially a racist organization that considered black people to be lesser humans.
Yeah.
Incapable of holding any sort of religious position within the church.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal. I mean, were you involved with this? Did you support it at the time? Did you actively try and fight it? If not, then you're kind of a scumbag.
So we'll discuss that then.
But yeah, so I would say right now one of the biggest things is people are very outspoken in their beliefs at the moment. Very much polarized, fully engaged. And I think politics right now is the driving force behind that. And the fact that there's been a very strong push, it seems, particularly from the right, to, vote your beliefs, vote the way Jesus would vote. What would Jesus vote? Apparently Mitt Romney.
Well, and I think it's funny that you bring that up because most of the religious right is Christian, and most of them don't consider Mormonism a part of Christianity. Prior to today, they thought of it as a sect.
They didn't until they had to. That reminds me of an interesting quotation I heard one time, which was that the left falls in love and the right falls in line. And I think that's what's happening here. But I don't want to go into the political aspect of that, however much fun that might be. But I do want to point out that the influence of the right, or I should say the influence of the religious right within the Republican Party does seem to be the driving face. It's what's kind of hijacked the headline issues within the party now all seem to fall back. The fact that people were in an uproar because the Democratic National Convention didn't have God specifically mentioned in the platform.
Yeah.
That in a pluralistic society should not matter. That's not in there because politically that should be irrelevant. I mean, especially in this country. And so when you have the other side go, wait a minute, back up, we got to mention God.
Well, and I think that whole debacle, as I would call it, stems from a misunderstanding or a rumor, I guess, that, yet another rumor that got spread around about Obama that he was an atheist.
He was a secret atheist Kenyan Muslim.
Muslim, yeah. Which, you can't really be a Muslim and an atheist at the same time. You could be an atheist and maybe be a part of a Muslim family, but you can't follow Muslim beliefs while not believing in a God, because who dictates, the Islamic faith? That's Allah, and
I hear he's pretty important to them.
He's important to their faith. So, not believing in a God is a.
Did you know that Muhammad is his prophet?
I've heard such things.
I didn't know. That was news to me.
But don't draw him. That's a warning out there. No. Do not draw him. You'll make some people pissed off.
Which is funny when you talk about militancy.
Yeah.
I might want to trash talk someone on Twitter or Reddit based on an ignorant or, I think fundamentally flawed religious comment. But I would never, ever in my right mind decide I'm going to put out an order, a hit order on someone because they did something that offended me, especially just offended me.
Yeah, killing or, defaming, hurting over personal feelings is just so petty. It's not.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not what atheists are about. That's what we can tell you.
You still have Salman Rushdie, who has a fatwa on him because of a book he wrote 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And people are re-upping the bounty. The man has never hurt a person in his life that, we know of, at least. He's a fairly soft-spoken individual when I've seen him in interviews and whatnot. And I think that's the big difference. Militancy is a very strong term, I think.
Yeah.
And militant atheists, which right now it seems that we're definitely more outspoken when we see, I think,
we'd be classed in that.
When we see religion, especially mixing with politics,
yeah,
which is a dangerous combination, I think we all believe. We are going to get more outspoken because we see our liberties and our viewpoints in the world being threatened, and I don't want that. And I'm certainly not going to get anywhere by being silent and letting you take control. The fact that I'm challenging you doesn't mean I'm suddenly trying to take over. It simply means I'm trying to tell you to back off. Step back. Check your views at the door. The ones that are relevant to the public sphere, let's talk about them. The ones that are not, like religious belief, or beliefs that are so fundamentally tied to religious belief that they're too controversial, I think, to introduce during an overtly political debate. Let's just leave those out of the discussion, because otherwise we aren't going to get anywhere. We're simply going to disagree. And that's not going to help anyone out.
Yeah.
We're all going to lose in that situation.
We're, firm believers in separation of church and state.
Which is to your benefit. Because it might not always be your church.
Yeah, let's say we were a theocracy, and Mitt Romney was the head of this theocracy. And he decided that all public policy, social policy, and everything was dictated by the Mormon faith.
So basically,
there'd be no more alcohol.
No
one would be allowed to drink alcohol ever.
I want to slap you for even implying it, but I won't.
There would never be fine Newcastle brown ales.
Now we're getting sued. Wait, is that free advertising or is that a copyright issue or a trademark issue?
We don't make money on this podcast yet, so I don't think it's an issue.
That's true. We're gonna get sued in 10 years, though. And we're like, what are you talking about?
Back tax.
Or they'll send us a free 6-pack.
We saw episode 4, Mister. Where's our money?
Back before you were millionaires from all your atheist propaganda. That was... You going on a jihad there, Billy? With your beard?
All right, we're going Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney's theocracy. Yes. The idea that, yes, you might push... And right now I think it's easy for generic Christianity to push because it feels, at least from what I can tell, feels under attack. You can't say Christmas at a lot of businesses, or they won't say Christmas, or, Jesus in the manger is not something people necessarily want on public lands or, in front of town hall. And so people feel like they're being attacked, and so it's easy when you are, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so Christian groups that have very fundamental theological differences that 150 years ago, were severe tensions. People were, basically split down, streets in towns based on, did you belong to this congregation or that? It's easy right now when it's just us versus them, but when you guys are finally in charge in a theocratic environment, is it the Southern Baptists, Primitive Baptists, Methodists? Is it the Calvinists, Lutherans, Catholics?
Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah.
They're
God forbid, Muslims. Are we in a Sharia law situation here? There's no saying. I mean, right now, if you think about it, one of the fastest growing populations in the country are Hispanic Catholics. So I would think that most Protestant groups would not be happy if suddenly Catholicism was the official law of the land. You might agree on some things, but there are some Protestant groups who don't even view Catholics as true Christians.
And that brings us back to why we're such firm believers of separation in church and state. It's because if our government, which it currently does, and these were the principles it was founded on, if our government focuses on making policies that are the best for, our population as a whole, we try not to offend anyone. We don't dictate official religions. We don't force public prayer. We don't outlaw religions that we think are ridiculous.
We don't think we need to. I think generally speaking, I'm of the opinion that through things like this, one day maybe we'll be good enough to be in a category where we can be considered movers and shakers of people's beliefs and ideologies. But until then, we're trying.
Yeah.
But, people like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. I've heard them described as the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse.
They're in the public eye.
But they're not trying to bash you, per se. I mean, Hitchens is definitely far more aggressive, which I think you need a little bit of that. You need a little oomph.
And here's the biggest thing. None of them, even when they go on rants or specifically say that they're against religion, they're not against individuals. They're against organized religion or the belief in a God system.
Corrosive thoughts and beliefs.
The destruction of critical thinking, that's what they're against.
In my most recent article, I say it's not that I don't believe in humanity, I just don't believe in your beliefs. And that's what it is. I think people are generally good, that they want the best for each other and themselves. But there's no doubt that there are belief systems out there that I think are false, and those falsehoods can breed dangerous situations, can stymie our development as a species. There's no saying that if you got someone who has an apocalyptic vision of the future, who really wants Israel to go to war with the Middle East so that we can usher in the second coming of Jesus, that's dangerous if they've got their finger on the red button. That's why I think, especially right now, there's so much outspoken, in some cases, disdain. There's no doubt, but if nothing else, just focus on the fact that, hey, we're here. Not everyone agrees with your beliefs at a very fundamental level. Let's really check these things a little bit and try and get back to a more reasoned discussion, especially when I think, from our perspective, we see a disturbing relationship between conservative, generally I would say probably fundamentalist religious groups, and what's still a fairly powerful, conservative political base. That to me is a very, very bad thing, and I do not want that. I mean, just looking at some of the people who made it through the Republican primaries this year, based, I think, largely on the fact that they were so outspoken in their faith, regardless of how, I think, bad some of their ideas were, how absurd in some senses. And you realize it's because they're proclaiming to be the most religious or the most true to Christianity.
Or in most cases, I think at least 5 of them they were told directly by God to run for president. Those word for word, they were told to run for president by their God.
It's because God thought it would be funny.
Yeah. There were some interesting debates.
Remember, if you talk to God, you're religious. If God talks to you, you're psychotic. There's an important distinction there. That's something you should keep in mind. If you were hearing the voice of God and he's telling you to do anything explicit, you might just want to check with someone else before you do. That's just my personal opinion. I would appreciate that. Just clear it by the wife. Honey, I was told today to go car bomb an embassy. Well, dear, maybe not. Maybe we'll just back that train. Slow your roll, dear. Let's just maybe go see the doctor. But again, that's the dangerous intersection of belief and the public sphere, which is, again, why we sometimes come off as a little bit loudmouth and in your face, I think, as a group. Also, the internet plus anonymity means being an asshole, apparently.
It's something, I see happen all the time on Twitter, atheists lashing out because they feel like they've been oppressed for so long. But as atheists, as we have discussions, which Michael and I do privately all the time, you learn boundaries, you learn how to better interact with your family members. A couple months ago, I told my mom I was an atheist for the first time. So we had one of those interesting first conversations. She's fairly religious, if not what she would classify as spiritual. She's still trying to figure out where she fits in the religious sphere. Her parents,
She believes in the basic tenets
yeah,
of Protestant Christianity.
Her parents were Catholic.
Catholic?
Her parents were. She raised me, and throughout most of her life, she was Protestant. And then there are certain things that she believes in that fall outside of religion, certain spiritual topics. But that brings us to ongoing segment on social media. That's a working title. It may change in the future. And recently, I've had a couple of discussions on Twitter with people who were comparing other life aspects to being an atheist and not believing in God. And that mainly goes into there's still a lot of questions that people have. People don't necessarily know everything that atheism entails, and we've mentioned it before, but it basically just means we don't believe in a God. But that usually stems to other things. That type of what we would consider healthy skepticism usually stems to things.
It's not that the belief, though, is what brings us to the skepticism. It's that usually the skepticism has brought us to the belief.
Yeah,
that they go hand in hand, I think.
That we think critically about things that are presented to us. That we don't necessarily take things with open, baseless faith.
Blind faith is something that... Now, even there, though, because you'll be challenged. The challenge always comes back. Oh, but you just have taking this on faith, or you're... The general difference is, one, I'm willing to admit if something changes. Like, if I believe a scientific fact about a black hole, cool. But if research comes out that says, oh, cool, we found out this new thing. Oh, it turns out that, like, Hawking's radiation, back when they figured out that black holes will slowly evaporate. No one thought that that was possible at the time. Someone hypothesized that it was. They ended up figuring out that it was true. And so a fundamental aspect of this thing that we thought we knew about changed.
Yeah.
But we're willing to say, cool, you presented a good argument, and that's something I will now accept on the evidence as presented.
That process itself is important,
Yes.
The scientific process. We don't pretend to know the answers to everything, but we're open for discussion.
I do sometimes.
If you asked me about Apple products, I might say, yeah, I pretty much know everything about that topic, even though that's not necessarily the case. But that's an ego thing. That's not. We don't factually believe, or we don't actually believe that.
We understand that our knowledge is almost always contingent and contextual. It's based on the facts as presented, and it's within the context that we have discovered them.
And I think we might agree that I am perfectly happy not knowing everything.
I don't want to know everything. How boring would that be?
It's the drive for knowledge. It's that, like, anytime... It's like working in a new job. That first day where you literally have no idea what you're doing. The person training you is like, here's the system we use. That's where the bathroom is. That's where you get your coffee. You have an hour for lunch break. Here's the best place to park. You're getting so much information that exercising of your brain, I think, is what drove us to be, I guess the word would be skeptical in the first place, or critical thinkers.
The main thing is that we are willing to evaluate as opposed to just blindly accept things, especially major things that are worthy of some measure of introspection, I think. So yes, I take it
like
on
the
blind
creation
faith, basically, that there is an external world, that I'm not just an, immaterial mind floating in immaterial nothingness, and this is all basically the matrix self-generated within my head.
Now, we don't,
I can't prove that, but I can say that there's good evidence for it.
After seeing the Matrix, I think it is possible, however, quite unlikely.
There are actually people who have postulated that there is almost no way you could tell.
Yeah.
And that, in theory, it would make sense for any super advanced civilization with computational power to at some point try and simulate the universe. And if it's actually simulating it finely enough, in theory, there would be an artificial universe created within it.
That we wouldn't see the lines.
Yeah.
Like, we wouldn't see through the code.
Now, there was also a thing, though, where a group of scientists recently pointed out that there was at least a litmus test where basically, if you could find out that the universe at its fundamental sub-Planck lengths was basically gridded. It had discrete points.
Yeah.
That would be evidence that you were in a artificial structure. You know, if you could look at your Retina display on your fancy new iPhone,
Yeah.
and you could actually see the pixels, you would go, wait a minute, this isn't just a fluid image. This is an artificially produced image.
I see what you mean.
Based on a real. Anyway,
That's a good analogy.
totally interesting aside. That just came out sometime this week. I saw on Slashdot, I believe.
Yeah.
So, cool stuff. Because the universe is cool. I have found. I'm pretty entertained by it.
So that brings us to our next segment, which is Atheist Ally or Godless Evildoer. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about Penn Jillette. He's the larger half of Penn and Teller, the magician duo. They've been around for decades. They do shows in Las Vegas. They've had shows on Showtime like Penn and Teller Bullshit. They have a show on Discovery, Penn and Teller Tell a Lie, which is their newest and, I guess, current show. But recently, I read his recent book. I think it came out in 2009, called God, No. And it was basically a story of his life, tales of why he is an atheist, how his atheism had direct applications to people he had met, because he's a very vocal atheist. He's all about the cause. He's also a very vocal libertarian.
Well, you don't bullshit the bullshitter. And in a sense, that's what his job is. So I think that he's very finely tuned to sleights of hand and general,
He knows exactly how to present a story.
Intellectual
as fact.
subterfuge. He's not willing to fall for it because that's his thing.
Yeah.
And he'll be damned if he's going to be tricked.
Very good book. Basically goes on random tangents. It essentially, the book itself, the framework that he used, had to do with his conversations with Glenn Beck. He actually is friends with Glenn Beck, which might sound shocking considering he's an atheist. But the way that he puts it is, despite the fact that him and Glenn Beck disagree on almost everything, they've found random common ground to agree with. Like
They both have feet, I hear.
They both have feet.
Hands, arms, ears. I think that's about as far as Glenn Beck and I
They
would get.
they both believe the Bible exists. But
It is an object that can be referenced by multiple parties.
they were talking about the Ten Commandments, and of course, atheists believe the Ten Commandments are no more useful than the rules of Hogwarts. And Glenn Beck kind of made a challenge to Penn. He asked him if atheists had a set of 10 commandments, what would they be?
Don't be a dick.
And essentially, he used those 10 commandments almost as direct copies of the 10 commandments that are in the Bible, with some slight modification because we don't care about God being the only God or not idolizing other gods. Obviously,
we would have
the
a few
atheists.
vacancies to fill.
But things like, thou shalt not steal. Penn says stuff like, don't be a dick, don't steal, only assholes steal, that sort of thing. And it's really cool. He talks about anything from having sex underwater while in scuba gear to talking to former devout Jews that through watching his shows and hearing him talk on his Showtime show, Penn and Teller Bullshit, about religion, because they had episodes specifically on the Bible and creationism. This Jew that converted solely because of the conversations that he had with Penn after shows, and it sort of started a personal journey that he wanted to thank Penn specifically. And after a show, Penn took this gentleman out to actually have his first non-kosher dinner. Had the biggest, fattest bacon cheeseburger that they could buy, like just 6 giant pieces of bacon, and
Anything that tells you can't have bacon is evil.
Horrible religion.
You know what? That would, where it says you can't have false idols, you must allow bacon in your worldview. I think that is something that if you don't, you are intellectually null and void on your face. I put that out there as the only thing all atheists might agree on, outside of the fact that There are no gods.
There are no dogs.
No, there are dogs, Billy. I've seen them.
That reminds.
There's at least 2. I know that much.
That reminds me of the. There's a joke. The insomniac, dyslexic, agnostic stayed up all night wondering if there was a dog. But anyways,
wordplay is fun.
I highly recommend his book. It's a good read. He's got a newer one out, and the title escapes me. But I just finished reading that, and I've actually got to finish reading another book, which we'll talk about at some point, so I can return it to Michael. But we would consider Penn Jillette an atheist ally, and we really love watching this stuff.
No, we will make sure that Billy does get through. Let's see. Was it God is not great?
God is not great.
Yeah.
There are others on a list. As an atheist that loves to read on the topic, there's a long list of books, including The God Delusion, and I've got about 1/4 or 1/3 of God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, which is
rest in peace. Pour one out for him.
Not on my laptop.
Not on my laptop.
I will say one thing too. When we review these, we're not just going to review things that are necessarily like The Circle Jerk, where it's just a bunch of atheists going, "We're awesome. This is great. Let's all be happy." No, there are. I have done it. It was not easy, but I've gotten through 1 or 2 like pro-creationist books before, which not particularly well written or convincing, but still presented an argument that deserves to be at least referenced. And some of them, like so talk about Richard Dawkins, and people immediately go outspoken atheist, and yet he's professionally a biological scientist. That was his thing, and it sort of through evolution, I think he became more outspoken because he saw that it had the explanatory framework to be intellectually satisfied as an atheist. And so, we want to touch on some of the things. I think one of his best books is The Greatest Show on Earth, which is just a defense and a kind of a building up of why evolution works from the numbers, from the evidence. Has nothing to do with trying to justify atheism. It's just a great read on why evolutionary theory is something that is not questionable. At least not insofar as is it true or is it false. The details are still being hammered out, of course. They always will be. There'll always be something else to tweak.
That's science. Gravity is a theory that,
well,
it's just
let's not get into the theory debate at the end of this podcast.
We've pretty much hammered it out. So it's the same thing with evolution. And
that's a semantic game that's played to try and knock down a otherwise powerful position. But in any case. So that pretty much wraps it up for this week's podcast. We'll be back next week with something else random to talk about.
If
probably not politics, thankfully.
If you haven't noticed, we're using a new camera. We actually got a dedicated camera for the shows now instead of using my iPhone 4S. So we're looking at increasing the quality of lighting and stuff as this goes along. And
you'll be able to see our ugly mugs that much clearer.
In full high definition.
1080p.
But thanks for watching.
Yeah, see you next week.
But
we're talking about it now. Screw it.
Oh, we haven't even done an intro, though.
So? We can always do the intro afterwards. And then just edit it, And that way we can recap what we're going to cover in the intro.
Yeah.
So, hey, that actually makes them. I think most intros are actually done that way, unless you have a strict script.
Twit specifically does it on all of their podcasts. So
let's graduate to Twit level.
He does the teaser.
Which we determined is an and logic gate. That's what the little symbol is. And apparently, it's determining a false
the twit symbol that they have for their
two
network.
lines and a D.
They slightly edited the and logic gate.
Well, one of the lines goes through, and the other one goes and then has a red dot, which I'm going to say means that it's a false statement. So twit is false, is what it's saying. Maybe that's why it's a twit. Twit's not a nice term. Call someone a twit because they're an idiot. Probably because they're wrong, i.e. their beliefs are false. Now that's deep level logoing. That's branding right there.
Yeah, but I don't think they wanted to call themselves that. It was literally just an acronym of This Week in Tech.
No, I know.
Okay.
I'm not actually thinking that they thought this deeply about what to call themselves or make their logo. You can't say it doesn't make sense.
This week, I was going to discuss...
Wait, just give me like 5 seconds. And don't cut this. I just want that to sink in. Because it was great.
I'm going to do a cool graphic for it, if I can.
There need to be explosions. Just show the cement truck for Mythbusters exploding. Like it'll be like smiling kittens, and then the kitten's face should explode.
Have you seen that YouTube channel, Cute Things Exploding? Yeah, okay. Cute things exploding.